Our planet is a world of richness and wonder. But at its extremes, nature can be unforgiving. David Attenborough travels to the most remote corners of our planet to understand how animals and plants have adapted to survive and thrive in almost impossible environments. The rainforests of South America are one of the richest environments on our planet, but also one of the most competitive.
Our planet's rainforests are home to millions of animal species. Nearly 90% of them are arthropods. Some call them bugs. And they're all searching for food. In Central and South America, insect communities have achieved something remarkable. These are leafcutter ants, and their underground nests are gigantic. They can be 30 meters across and contain 8 million individuals. And they owe their success to something they devised long, long before we did: agriculture. Leafcutters have found a way of harvesting the vast proliferation of leaves produced by the forest trees. They remove them, piece by piece. But they don't eat them. In fact, they can't even digest them. The leaves are fodder for their underground farms. Like all complex colonies, the leafcutters have a central organizing individual. Their queen is many times larger than the workers. When she founded the colony, she brought with her a tiny piece of fungus that now grows in gardens throughout the nest. As it grows, the fungus produces little white, knob-like structures which are full of nutrients, which the ants can digest. Out in the forest, foragers cut the leaves into segments and carry them back to the nest. They have sharp, powerful jaws which slice through the toughest leaves. The pieces they cut can be as much as 50 times their own body weight. Their nest may be up to 120 meters away, a very long distance for a porter that is only a centimeter long. Here, the smallest caste of ants in the community, the minims, are hard at work in the underground gardens. They receive the leaves from the foragers, chew them up and feed them to the fungus. They also control the quality of the leaves sent to them by the workers. If it suits them, they release a pheromone which encourages the workers to cut more. If they dislike what they're getting, they release a different pheromone that stops the collection of that kind of leaf. A single colony of some 8 million individuals can harvest a fifth of the new leaves grown each year by the trees in the surrounding forest. Millions of closely related individuals have become a single, integrated superorganism. The arthropods are the most successful animals on the planet. We already know of over 1 million different species, and we're discovering more every day. And the reason is quite simple. They've had over 400 million years in which to evolve new ways of feeding and fighting and collaborating. Flight has been the key to the success of some of our planet's most remarkable inhabitants. In the cloud forests of Ecuador, there is a plentiful supply of a type of food produced by plants to attract flying animals. Nectar. Around 130 million years ago, plants recruited insects to transport pollen from one flower to another by bribing them with a sugar-rich drink. Birds, when they first evolved, were unable to collect it because there was seldom something solid nearby on which they could perch. Then, around 30 million years ago, a kind of bird appeared that had no need of such a perch. Hummingbirds. They could hover. They do so by beating their wings extremely swiftly, so fast, in fact, that they make a humming noise. The largest hummingbird beats its wings around 14 times a second. But some tiny species are able to do so 80 times a second. To fly in this extraordinary way, hummingbirds have changed the structure of their wings and the way they beat them. Most birds flap their wings up and down, but hummingbirds flap theirs more like insects. They twist their wings around between strokes and so can generate lift when flapping both forwards and backwards. Doing this at high speed puts a huge strain on their wings. So, to withstand it, the wings have a special structure. The arm bones have shrunk, but the bones of the hand have elongated and support most of the wing surface. Twisting this wing at the shoulder and at the wrist produces the hummingbird's distinctive wing beat. So, a combination of modified wing bones and precise control of wing motion gives hummingbirds the aerial agility they need to collect nectar. And they need plenty of it. Hovering burns a huge amount of fuel. All hummingbirds have to constantly top up their tanks with high-energy nectar. And when supplies are low, competition can be fierce. Now, their flying skills are put to a very different use. To fight off rivals. So the battle for the supremacy of the skies still continues every day around the world.
To understand how animals we know today came to be, David Attenborough must travel back into the past. High in the mountains of northern Africa lies a clue to one of the most important survival tricks animals have ever developed.
600 million years ago, the world was very different from the planet we know today. The land was entirely without animals or plants. But the oceans were teeming with life. But one family was particularly abundant and varied. Trilobites. In Morocco, on the southern flanks of the Atlas Mountains, the hills contain an amazing variety of them. The trouble is, the rock is very hard and the trilobites are quite rare. But when these people find them, their specimens are absolutely extraordinary. The world's leading trilobite experts, such as Professor Richard Fortey, come here to study these extraordinary animals. He believes that their external skeleton was the key to their success.
The trilobites did almost everything you possibly can do with an exoskeleton. I think that skeleton was what gave them an advantage. They were protected. They could do all kinds of interesting things. They could grow spines. They could get flat like pancakes. They could protect themselves by getting thick exoskeleton with pobbles all over it.
There is no question that an exoskeleton gave the trilobites protection. But it also gave them something else of great value. There must have been many reasons why trilobites were so successful, but one of them unquestionably was their power of sight. They had eyes, not just eye spots that could tell the difference between light and dark, but complex eyes that could form detailed pictures of their surroundings for the first time in the history of life. Eyes like these. Most animals on Earth today have eyes of one kind or another. Most are made from soft tissue, as ours are. But trilobite eyes are unique. Their lenses are derived from their mineralized external skeleton. They're made of rock. Each one of these little dots is a lens, and each is made from calcite, a crystalline form of chalk.
Trilobites were the only organisms ever really to use this stuff as their lens material. And in doing so, they evolved very sophisticated vision indeed.
But the shape of a trilobite's eyes can reveal more than the kind of image they produced. Eyes can tell us a surprising amount about how and where an animal lived. This one, with its eyes on turrets, probably lived in the sea where it was gloomy, but nonetheless there was enough light for the animal to be able to see on either side of it. This one, on the other hand, has eyes also on turrets, but at the top it has flanges like sunshades. So it's as likely that it lived in the shallow sunlit sea and valued shades above its eyes so it didn't get dazzled. And finally, there's this creature, and this is the one I think is particularly delightful. This one has its eyes on stalks and probably lived under the mud, gobbling up food there with just its eyes peeking out of the top to see whether there was danger around. So, trilobites were the first animals to see clearly. They were, without question, the most successful animals of their time. Indeed, they could be counted as one of the most successful kinds of animals in the entire history of life.
The ocean is home to more than half of life on Earth today. Hidden beyond the waves lie underwater cities, crammed with life. The Great Barrier Reef, just off the northeast coast of Australia, is home to one of the most extraordinary communities of animals on the planet.
Reefs much like these develop in the shallow tropical waters that surround many an island and continental coast. But few can match the Great Barrier in either size or complexity. That becomes clear when you look at the reef from above.
At this height, you can begin to appreciate the immense size of the Barrier Reef. It's 2,300 kilometers long, 1,400 miles. It's the largest living structure on the planet.
It stands in waters with an average depth of just 35 meters. And that's just about as far as sunlight can penetrate with any strength. Light is crucially important to reef-building corals because they have developed a special partnership with microscopic algae, plants that actually grow within their tissues. The algae get a safe home and, like all plants, when they photosynthesize, they produce energy. The coral polyps use this energy to construct their limestone home. Most of the reef's inhabitants depend on one another for survival. But it is the coral that is the foundation of the reef, and it plays a crucial role in many of the relationships. This is the crown of thorns starfish. For it, coral is food, and it will eat relentlessly if not kept in check. But to other creatures, like the guard crab, coral is home. The crab is prepared to defend its patch from the carnivorous starfish at all costs. The crown of thorns, however, is much larger than most other starfish on the reef, so the tiny crab is forced to take a more stealthy approach. Hidden within the coral, it waits for its moment to attack. The starfish has left itself dangerously exposed, but the crab is cautious. When it can, the crab uses its powerful pincers to snip at the starfish's spines and tube-like feet. Before retreating back into the safety of the coral. The crab has won this battle. We now know the reef has dwindled and recovered many times in its long history, but it also has to withstand a major change every 24 hours as the tide retreats and comes back. At low tide, the water drains away very quickly, leaving the topmost community of creatures dangerously exposed. Some are washed out with the tide. Others swim to safety. But the coral polyps can't move. Temperatures on the surface of the reef can now reach a scorching 30 degrees centigrade. The exposed corals could easily dry out and be damaged by intense ultraviolet rays. But corals have ways of protecting themselves. When exposed to air, they produce huge amounts of mucus, which keeps them wet and acts like a sunscreen. This remarkable slime actually increases its UV resistance, becoming stronger if the temperatures soar. So the coral manages to survive for the few hours that it's out of water. But there's one fish that manages to turn this exposure to its advantage. The epaulet shark remains on the reef even when the tide goes out. Of course, with so little water, it doesn't get as much oxygen as it requires normally, but it deals with that possibility by shutting off a part of its brain and so reducing its oxygen demands. As the retreating tide exposes the topmost branches of the corals, the shark remains in the little pools between them for as long as it can. And then it sets off to try and find food. Shrimps, crabs, and small worms that live on the reef. And it does that by exploiting another talent it has. It can, in effect, walk. It may be slow going, but the little shark manages to make its way between the rocky pools to look for prey that may be imprisoned in them. It has the run of the place until the tide returns once more to flood the reef top. So the inhabitants of the reef, each in its own way, deal with the daily hazards brought by exposure.
Shaped by nature's mightiest forces, remote islands offer a refuge for the planet's rarest and strangest creatures. One group of islands in the vastness of the Pacific is home to a collection of animals and plants unlike anywhere else in the world: Galapagos.
The islands lie 600 miles from the coast of South America and straddle the equator. There are 16 of them and a multitude of small islets, all separated from the rest of the world by the huge expanse of ocean. It's perhaps surprising that the Galapagos should have become famous for its biodiversity. For the fact is that living conditions here are very tough. On the equator, the heat is intense. There's very little water. Much of the land is covered by bare volcanic rock. And yet every species that lives here is descended from an ancestor from the continents that have taken on these conditions and won. And the way in which they did so is extraordinary. Reptiles got to Galapagos by floating across the ocean on rafts of vegetation. Only hardy animals like the iguanas and tortoises could make that 600-mile voyage. Who knows how many thousands of animals of many kinds have been lost at sea on rafts like these, dying from thirst and exposure. But reptiles are very tough. They can go without food or water for days, weeks, even months. No mammal can survive such hardships as long as they can. And here, the iguanas settled and multiplied. Today, there are thousands of them. So many and so widely distributed throughout the islands that they are now one of the Galapagos' most famous inhabitants. So many that their problem is not how to defend themselves, but how to find enough food to support their great numbers. So they ventured into the sea itself to graze seaweed on the sea floor. But cold water can be dangerous for cold-blooded reptiles. After a few minutes feeding at sea, the iguanas are seriously chilled and in urgent need of a warm-up. And their skin enables them to get that. It is black. Dark objects absorb heat, and each scale in the marine iguana's skin is like an element in a miniature solar panel. Now, all a marine iguana needs to do to bring its body back up to temperature is to bask in the hot equatorial sun for an hour or two. But eating nothing but seaweed creates another problem: too much salt. The marine iguanas dealt with that in a very particular way. They evolved a special gland in their nose. They simply sneeze the excess salt from their blood. These changes had to happen very quickly in evolutionary terms if the iguanas were to survive. But here, conditions sometimes change, and then even iguanas struggle to keep up. Every 3 to 7 years, the weather becomes very extreme and irregular. It's a phenomenon called El Niño. And it can have a devastating effect on wildlife. Evolutionary biologist Maren Vitusek has studied the effects of El Niño on the Galapagos marine iguanas. She discovered that it decimates their food.
Marine iguanas usually eat red and green algae, and that algae dies off completely during El Niños, during strong El Niños, and is replaced by a brown algae. And marine iguanas aren't able to digest the brown algae, so they can eat it, but it sits in their stomach, basically in a big lump. So you can find iguanas dead on the beach of starvation with their stomachs full of this brown algae that they're just not able to digest.
The marine iguana is the worst affected of all Galapagos animals during an El Niño. As many as 90% of them can perish. And new research has shown that iguanas have evolved a special ability that enables them to survive the famine. Their bodies shrink. They lose not just fat and muscle, but bone. The iguanas can actively reduce their skeletons over just a few months.
So we saw that the largest animals were decreasing their body length by as much as 20%. And the magnitude of that means that it can't be simply that they're changing their cartilage or connective tissue or resorbing muscles. Those things together account for about 10% of length. So instead, 20% of shrinkage really indicates that it's got to be the skeleton itself that's decreasing in length.
This amazing ability to reabsorb bone in times of hardship is unique to these reptiles. But iguanas were not alone in adapting to these desolate volcanic shores. This is the lava heron. It's well camouflaged. Its grey feathers make it relatively inconspicuous against the blackened lava rocks. So moving stealthily, it can hunt very effectively. Its favourite prey is the Sally Lightfoot crab, whose striking red shell stands out against the jet-black lava. But the adult crabs have tough shells and sharp pincers, and herons know better than to attack a full-grown one. Juvenile crabs will be a much more attractive prospect. But they have responded to the landscape. They have black shells that make them far less conspicuous to prowling herons. This time, the lava heron will have to make do with a really tiny snack, a Sally Lightfoot hatchling.
Extremely remote and lacking fertile soil, this baking hot volcanic landscape of Galapagos is unforgiving. But even here, plants found a way to colonize and thrive.
This is the seed of a mangrove. And when it falls, it drops into the sea and floats. This part of it is green, so can make food just like a leaf can, and the seed can remain at sea alive for a very long time. But eventually it may float into an estuary, and there the water is brackish and less buoyant, so the heavy end of the seed falls, and it hangs in the water like this. And its tip It may be at low tide, trails into the mud and sticks. And the mangrove has planted itself.
These trees are very effective colonists of newly formed islands. The young seedlings quickly establish themselves. Their tangled arching roots form a grid which slows down the tidal water surging through them, causing it to drop its sediment as mud. At low tide, all kinds of creatures come out to scavenge among the roots. And when the tide is high, other creatures swim in to find shelter. The waters around the tangled roots serve as nurseries for many species of fish. So plants created habitats where animals could survive both in water and out of it.
Today, the Galapagos is one of the most biodiverse islands on our planet. But one group of animals never made it to this archipelago.
While there are many kinds of herbivorous reptiles in the Galapagos, there are no large predatory mammals of any kind. And this has had a profound effect on the animals that did get here. It's something noticed by every visitor who comes to the islands. All the animals here are amazingly tame. Even the little finches are happy to bathe within inches of a stranger. The lack of predators may have a surprisingly widespread effect. It's not just that animals are not frightened of strangers, the so-called island tameness, but that time that would be spent hiding from attackers can now be used to find food, find mates, and raise young, and so produce more young, which hastens the progress of evolution. The lack of big predators has had an effect on all the animals of the Galapagos. They reproduce freely, so populations increase rapidly. And so, consequently, does evolutionary change. But island tameness has dangers. If a major predator does appear, then wildlife will be ill-equipped to defend itself. And one did. In the year 1535, the most successful predatory animal of all arrived. Man. There is little or no fresh water on these islands, but they have a much rarer resource. Giant tortoises can survive without food or water for very long periods. So ships could come here, collect the tortoises, stow them in the hold, and then after weeks at sea, bring one out, butcher it, and have a meal of fresh meat. Slow, lumbering, and with no way of defending themselves, the tortoises were easy victims. The population was decimated. Between the 16th and 20th centuries, more than 100,000 were taken away and slaughtered. Pinta, located on the shipping route around the northern fringe of the archipelago, was a favorite stopover for ships and their hungry crews, and the unique pinta tortoise was presumed extinct by the early 20th century. But in 1972, a living male pinta tortoise was discovered in the undergrowth. He became an international celebrity, and he was given a name to reflect his state: Lonesome George. He's about 80 years old, and he's getting a bit creaky in his joints, as indeed am I. He is arguably the rarest animal in the world. Certainly there can be none rarer, for he is the last of his kind. His female died a long, long time ago. When he dies, the pinta species of Galapagos tortoise will be extinct. But he's a very important animal. Probably more than any other single creature, he's focused the attention of the world on the fragility of our environment, and he's stimulated science to look into whole new areas of research here in the Galapagos. Just 14 days after we filmed Lonesome, he died in his sleep. But human beings can not only destroy, they can conserve. In the 1970s, the tortoise population reached an all-time low. There were only a few thousand of them left. But now there's a major breeding program for them. The tortoise population today is increasing. Once threatened species have been brought back from the brink.
Today, as many as 1 million animal and plant species are under threat of extinction, many within decades. An exploding population and climate change have brought destruction to habitats all around the world. In Kew Gardens in Britain, scientists are racing to discover how human beings can help preserve the richness of our planet.
Kew is in the forefront of botanical research, helping to ensure that we not only understand plants, but protect them in all their astonishing variety. Here in the water lily room, experts face a desperate scramble to save one species from oblivion. Nestling amongst the giant water lily pads is the tiny Nymphea thermarum, the Rwandan water lily, the smallest and rarest water lily in the world. Extinct in the wild, these precious few individuals are some of the last remaining specimens. A single specimen was brought back to Europe, but the species remained on the brink. Its seeds would germinate, but the seedlings always died. Then some seeds were given to this man at Kew, Carlos Magdalena. Known in Spain as the plant messiah, Carlos is famous for his great skill in rescuing endangered species. But even Carlos nearly met his match with this tiny plant.
I tested many different seedlings. Nothing seemed to work.
Well, that meant that the species was about to disappear forever.
Exactly, and that was very worrying for me. So I started becoming a little bit obsessed with it. Yes, I mean, it's just a bit distressing, isn't it? To know that something that you can do or not to make a difference to a species.
Carlos didn't give up. He had one more unlikely idea. he tried growing the water lily out of water.
If you think about it, growing a water lily out of the water is something as crazy as trying to grow a cacti floating in a pond. So it was the last unlikely thing that logically you will do. And then that is the result.
Carlos's stroke of genius was to make use of this plant's strange ecological quirk. Nearly all other water lilies only grow in deep water, but the Rwandan spring was very shallow, little more than damp mud. And so by growing it in pots above the water, Carlos replicated its natural habitat. Within a few short weeks, there were 50 specimens, all set to flower. So this is a crucial moment, because if this works, and it's clearly going to, you have in fact yourself saved a species.
If I didn't have this crazy idea, the whole species will be gone forever.
That's absolutely charming. Beautiful. In an environment with so many species and so many spectacular ones, it might seem odd to spend so much trouble in trying to save just one comparatively inconspicuous one. But the relationships within the rainforest are so complex and so extensive that the loss of just one can have a whole series of unpredictable consequences. The loss of a plant can mean the loss of an insect. The loss of an insect can mean that a bush loses its pollinator. The loss of a bush can mean that a mammal has lost its food plant. Nobody can say exactly when or if such things are going to happen. But to me, preventing it happening in the first place seems to make absolute sense.
Just a few miles away from Kew Gardens lies an ambitious project. Which might be the key to ensuring the survival of every remaining plant species on Earth.
The work takes place deep underground in a labyrinth of sealed vaults that are encased in steel and concrete. It's called the Kew Millennium Seed Bank. Its contents are so valuable that it was specifically designed to withstand the impact of a bomb or an air crash. Inside these vaults, there are seeds gathered from plants all over the world. In fact, as much as 10% of the world's known species are represented in there. Of the Seed Bank project is this gigantic freezer full of seeds in sealed jars. The conditions inside are perfect for long-term storage. But the job is aided by the very nature of seeds. The seed is the stage in which a plant can remain dormant, waiting until conditions for germination are right. Inside each seed, there's a store of food. Outside, there's a tough protective shell to guard against predation or damage. In fact, a seed is a kind of time capsule that can live for sometimes a decade, sometimes even centuries. The aim of the seed bank is to prolong that period as long as possible. To do that, they clean the seeds, dry them, put them in jars like this, and then keep them here at minus 20 degrees centigrade. How long they will survive under these conditions, nobody knows, but it's certainly going to be for a very long time. New samples arrived at the seed bank every day. They are first identified and studied in microscopic detail by Chief Morphologist Dr. Wolfgang Stubbe.
The latest report from Israel claims that date palm seeds have been found in King Herod the Great palace in Masada, and they germinated after 2,000 years. So that is possible, and this is the principle the Millennium Seed Bank is built upon, that seeds can survive for millennia if necessary.
The seed bank project is still in its infancy, but the evidence is that there's no time to lose. There are already seeds stored here from plants that are now extinct in the wild.
The problem is, what many people don't understand, is that if a species goes extinct, it means it is gone for us forever. There was 5 mass extinctions in the Earth's history. After every mass extinction, it took between 4 and 20 million years for biodiversity to bounce back to pre-extinction levels. Now, clearly we cannot wait 4 million years for life to bounce back. So if we don't keep seeds here, and this plant species goes extinct, it will be lost to mankind forever.
Thankfully, there's a great momentum behind the seed bank project. Over the next few decades, these shelves will be filled to capacity. There's enough space here to hold seed from every single species of plants on this planet. But this place is not just an insurance policy against the ultimate apocalypse. This is of huge value right now. For wherever we discover that a plant is teetering on the brink of extinction, we can now bolster its numbers with seeds from here and so ensure that no plant species on Earth need go extinct.